As I'm recording this video, election results haven't yet been confirmed, but from how things are looking, the establishment are going to get what they want, and that is a Labour Party in power. For those watching this video in the States, that's basically like getting a woke Democrat Party for another term. What can we expect from the Labour government? Because that's like the Democrat Party in America. You can expect higher taxes. Yep. You can expect more immigration, more mass immigration. Yep. Even Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, said he wants to fast track illegal immigrants to citizenship in the United Kingdom. And not only can you expect more mass immigration, but the UK taxpayer will be funding them staying in the UK. But let me be fair, this is not just the Labour Party's doing. You know, the Conservative Party have had years to come up with an effective way to tackle illegal immigration. They came up with the Rwanda policy, and that was a shambles. I don't even think a plane has even taken off to Rwanda. If it had done, I remember like a few months back, that less than 10 people were on the flight. For those watching in America, the Rwanda policy was basically, if you arrived in the UK illegally, then they take you to Rwanda. And when illegal immigrants got to Rwanda, the Rwandese government would decide their fate, whether their asylum application would be successful or not. If it would be successful, then they'd get asylum in Rwanda and not the United Kingdom. That was the plan. It's failed though. It sounded nice whilst they were advertising it, but it's failed. I'm still going to get to the reason why the Conservatives are scared to death of Nigel Farage and the Reform Party and the ground that Reform UK are, gaining in such quick time. I'm still going to get to that. But before I do, I need to add some context as to why people are fed up of this current Conservative government and the lies that they've been fed for the past couple of years. Just a quick history of the Conservative Party and why they're so unattractive to voters right now and why people are looking for an alternative. They're even swinging to Labour or Reform, people who would have voted Conservative, because they're fed up of a Conservative government. Now, let's start from Brexit. David Cameron leaves and Theresa May is appointed. Number one. Number two, Theresa May negotiates the worst deal for Brexit, whereby the British Parliament and British people were not accepting that BS negotiation and actually wanted to renegotiate. So what does that mean? Theresa May, you need to be gone. So there she goes. Number three, Boris Johnson steps in. This guy was probably the worst of them all. So his administration came around COVID, and this is probably the worst man to have in power in the United Kingdom. I mean, there were so many scandals. There was COVID, there was meant to be restrictions. He wasn't honoring the restrictions, Boris Johnson. He was partying. Matt Hancock, who was the Secretary of State for Health under Boris Johnson, was, let's just say, not honoring his marriage, and it was caught on camera. And me personally speaking, I think the worst thing Boris Johnson did was sabotage peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. This was confirmed, by Ukrainian military. He went over to Kiev to sabotage peace talks just like a month into the conflict. He sabotaged peace talks. This is known. This is not conspiracy. This is known. So he leaves. Liz Truss comes in, blows a hole in the economy. Then an unelected Rishi Sunak comes in, super ineffective. And this is why people are now looking at the Reform Party. This is why the big threat is now Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. And this is why they're gathering so much steam. Now, a lot of people are probably thinking to themselves, like, yeah, they're not going to win this election. Yeah, but they've gathered up so much steam in this election in such a quick period of time. Nigel Farage wasn't initially running. Then he said, you know what, I'm going to run. And then this is when, of course, everything comes out the woodworks of people saying, racist things. And, when he wants to launch his campaign, all of a sudden these things are happening. But before he wanted to launch the campaign to run for the leader of Reform, nothing was coming out against Nigel Farage. But everything just conveniently comes out now that he's running. And what makes this even worse is the media aren't even looking for the individual that was saying racist things. They're saying, Nigel, what do you have to say about this? It's like, hang on, Nigel didn't say it. Why don't you go to the man who said it and try and get answers? My guess is that was an agent. That was an agent of the establishment that came to try to sabotage, Nigel Farage and the Reform Party UK, because it wouldn't make sense. If someone's saying racial slurs, why don't you go conduct an interview with him and ask him, who are you? Are you part of Nigel's campaign? No, they leave him and they go straight to Nigel Farage and say, Nigel Farage, this guy was part of your campaign and he was racist. What do you have to say about it? Nigel Farage is like, yeah, what? Why didn't you go to him? Why are you coming to me to talk about what he said? So it looked like an agent, an establishment agent that came to try and sabotage what Nigel Farage was doing. And you now need to look at the next election, because what does Nigel Farage have now? He has years now to show you the incompetencies of the Labour government and why you need reform at the next government. So, this is, for me, this Reform Party UK has been very successful now, not because they haven't won. So not because of that reason of election results, but because they're setting themselves up brilliantly for the next election. They've gathered up steam so far, and they now have years to keep going and gather up more steam for the next election, where it could be possible Reform UK could be victorious. So that's where we are in UK politics. Right now, I'm going to watch Boris Johnson, just try and, fearmonger amongst the public and say why, Nigel Farage is a Putin puppet and why you'd be better off without a Labour government. Labour's going to win anyway, but let's just watch what Boris Johnson has to say. This is probably the worst guy from the Conservative Party, but let's see what he has to say, and then, yeah.
Can I first of all say how wonderful it is to see you all again? I feel deprived of your company, and how grateful I am to all of you for everything that you've been doing over the last few weeks, and for coming so late tonight to this venue, way past Keir Starmer's bedtime. If you are slightly surprised to see me, I want to be absolutely clear that I was glad when Rishi asked me to help. Of course, I couldn't say no, and I'm here for one reason and one reason only, which is the same reason as all of you, all of us are here. We're here because we love our country, and whatever our differences, they are utterly trivial by comparison with the disaster we may face if these so-called opinion polls are right. And it's still an if. I think and hope the British people will show more sense on Thursday and draw back from the brink. But if these polls are right, then at the very moment when this country has beaten COVID and beaten post-COVID inflation, at the very moment when we should be encouraging enterprise and growth and putting some money into home ownership and putting some money into people's pockets, Westminster is about to go in diametrically the opposite direction. And so none of us can sit back as a Labour government prepares to use a sledgehammer majority to destroy so much of what we have achieved, what you have achieved. 5 years ago, you helped to send Jeremy Corbyn and his then disciple, Keir Starmer, into orbit where they belonged, and we got Brexit done. We restored democracy. We restored democracy to our country, and it was because we got a proper Brexit, and you will all remember how hard that fight was, that we came out of the EU single market, we controlled our own regulation. And my friends, whatever people may say, that national independence was vital when it came to approving COVID vaccines faster than any EU country, and therefore getting the fastest vaccine rollout of any major economy and the fastest economic rebound in the G7. Let me just ask you, in case you've forgotten, because I haven't had a chance to remind you recently, which, of all the 200 countries on earth, which was the first government, after all the miseries of COVID, to put a licensed, approved, and effective vaccine into the arms of our citizens? It was a British government. It was a Brexit government. It was a Conservative government. And it was It was thanks to
I love how he fails to bring up the fatalities of a lot of these vaccines. He doesn't talk about that, but he's going to talk about he came through with a successful vaccine. There was a lot of fatalities. This man's a master liar, honestly. I have to give it to Boris Johnson. He can lie, and he has an army of people around that are just taking and buying up his BS. But, all right, let's carry on.
It was thanks to Brexit, which you helped deliver. This country was able to take the lead in standing up for Ukraine, in delivering the AUKUS agreement, many other things, taking back control of our money, our laws. Thanks to Brexit, that we can today.
No, I'm sorry. I don't want to taking control of the money, the laws. Oh my days! This guy sabotaged peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. He sabotaged it, which ended up in the UK taxpayer forking over billions to Ukraine, of a war that's still carrying on today because of Boris Johnson. And he's going to sit down here and talk like he's holier than thou. Oh, man.
Finally legally control our own borders. And is it not therefore the height of insanity, if these polls are right, that we are about to give Labour a supermajority, which they will use to make us nothing but the punk of Brussels, taking EU law by dictation with no say on how that law is made, paying into Brussels budgets again, you watch, as the price for access, scrapping the Rwanda scheme, just as it is on the verge of coming into force.
You've had
just
time.
As it is being imitated by governments around the world, and just as actually being to act as a deterrent, and bringing back uncontrollable free movement as the price of Starmer's deal with the EU. Now, do you think this country really wants to give Starmer that kind of mandate? I don't think they do, and yet Labour are so cocky that they're so complacent, they're so smug, they're barely conceding their agenda anymore. And we can see what it is: whacking up taxes on pensions, on property, persecuting private enterprise, attacking private education and private healthcare, with all the pointless extra burden that will place on the taxpayer. And all the time, poor old Starmer is so terrified of disobeying left-wing dogma that he's reluctant to explain the difference between a man and a woman, and he just sits there with his mouth opening and shutting like a stunned mullet. Do we want this kind of madness? Do we want ever higher taxes? Do we want more wokery imposed on our schools? And yet this is coming now, this week. This gigantic, unless we change it, this gigantic Labour majority pregnant with horrors. Because even though Labour's share of the vote right now is far lower than ours was in 2019, and even though Starmer has record low approval ratings for a man in his position, supposedly on the verge of office, our system, I'm afraid, will deliver that supermajority because too many good, kind, moderate Tories are about to vote for other parties, apparently, and thereby get exactly the opposite of what they really want. Even if those other parties turn out to be full of Kremlin crawlers who actually make excuses for Putin's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. They say Putin's a good operator, puffing their cheroots, and Putin's a good operator, runs a tight ship, you know. Well, if that's what they mean by a man who shoots journalists and poisons his opponents and murders thousands of innocent Ukrainian civilians, I say shame on them. They can achieve... They can achieve nothing at this election except to usher in the most left-wing Labour government since the war with a huge majority, and we must not let it happen. Don't let the Putinistas deliver the Corbynistas. Don't let Putin's pet parrots give this entire country psittacosis, which is a disease you get, by the way, from cozying up to pet parrots. Ladies and old friends, if you actually want higher taxes next week, this year, if you feel you've got a few thousand to spare, then vote Labour on Thursday. If you want uncontrolled immigration and mandatory wokery and pointless kowtowing to Brussels again, then go right ahead, make my day, vote for Starmer. But if you want to protect our democracy and our economy and keep this country strong abroad by spending 2.5% of our GDP on defence, which Labour still refuses to commit to, then you know what to do, don't you, everybody? Yeah. There's only one thing to do. Vote Conservative on Thursday, my friends. And I know you will. I know you will. But in the brief time that we have left, I hope that you will encourage everybody else in this country to do the same. Thank you very much.
Last point to make before I wrap up this video. When it comes to Russia and Ukraine, Nigel Farage got it right. Boris Johnson got it wrong. He sabotaged peace talks. He encouraged Ukraine to carry on fighting. This is all documented, by the way. It's all documented. Farage got it right. Boris Johnson got it wrong. This is just the truth. Regardless of what you think about reform or the Conservative Party, this is just the facts. You know, Farage was spot on. You know, he's not a Kremlin crawler. He was very spot on. So yeah. And by the way, I'm not affiliated to any political party. I'm just giving it to you, you know, from how I see it and how I read about it. So yeah. Anyway, guys, let me know in the comment section what you think. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.